you don't have a keg washer, this cost me $0 to wash kegs. All right, today we're going to talk about how to wash kegs in a small brewery if you don't have a keg washer. So first, we need some kegs. Right here, I have a keg. This is a 15.5 gallon half barrel keg. This is the standard size keg for most breweries. They also come in quarter barrels, which are 7.75 gallons, and slim kegs or sixtels, which are sixth barrel kegs, which are about 5.16 gallons. So what is a keg? Generally, they are made out of stainless steel. This is a shell with some plastic ends on it to reduce the weight, but all kegs work pretty much the same. It's a stainless steel or plastic, some kegs are plastic, structure that holds liquid inside, generally beer or carbonated pressurized liquid, that is then extracted from the keg via this top coupling mechanism. So this entire shell of the keg is one piece, and this part right here actually can be disassembled and taken out. This is called the spear. This specific coupling, specific to a certain style of coupler, these spears are manufactured by a company called Micromatic. They are specifically designed for the complementary coupler to fit into the shape of the particular one. This is a Sankey D coupler, so it's got two prongs that fit in there, and the coupler twists, and then you can depress this and it will engage the keg. So this spear is one complete mechanism that has this coupling. It's a dip tube that runs all the way to the bottom of the keg. The way that these kegs work is you apply CO2 pressure into the keg. It applies gas pressure to the headspace in the keg and pushes the beer out from the bottom, the dip tube that comes to the bottom of the keg, through the top and through this ball, and ultimately through your coupler. When I started filming this video, I was describing how these mechanisms work, and then I quickly realized that I can't describe them super well, and that's always frustrating because I want to understand how it works and not just regurgitate information. So I did a little research just to kind of jog my memory and learn something new. So how do these coupling mechanisms work? You've got this ball in the middle that when depressed, beer will come through. But I was always wondering, how does the gas go in if the beer's coming up? Well, this rubber plastic seal right here is actually a separate gas valve. And depressurize this so we can show you. On the bottom of a coupler, you have a metal prong that depresses the ball when the coupler is engaged, but you also have that gasket that protrudes out further, and that's where the CO2 comes out of. That gap in between the inner prong and the rest of the coupler. The ball depresses to let beer come through, but then this area depresses to let CO2 in. So this pushes the ball down and CO2 flows around the outside, applying pressure to the top of the keg and sending beer out of our coupler. I thought that was interesting. We know how kegs work. Now we need to know, how do we wash them in a brewery when you don't have a keg washer? Well, let's get things set up. First step, we need a pump in order to recirculate liquid through the inside of the keg to clean it. We need hoses to connect the pump to the coupler. We need a coupler to connect to the keg. And then we need tri-clamps and gaskets to put it all together. Let's check out the manifold that we've set up and see how we make this happen. All right, so for the third time, the camera shut off when I was putting this together, but we've got our pump over here, a inlet hose that is a brewery hose connected via tri-clamp to the inlet of the pump. We have, coming out of the pump, a T. I don't know if you can see that. A T where we have a valve on one end of the T. This will be where our CO2 line is connected, and we can turn that on and off via this valve. And then we finally have a beer line or a outlet of the pump connected to our coupler with a beer washer and a beer nut. And this has two valves on it to isolate gas and liquid. So first step in the process is we are going to rinse the kegs of any beer that was left inside. I'm just going to use hot water for that. So now I've got inlet into the pump, coming up to the T. There's my CO2 connected to the CO2 tank. And the outlet coming out, and it'll be on the keg. My MO is I always have 2 of the same size kegs for the other keg to be inverted on top of when I'm doing this step in particular. Bring them about, 6 inches apart or so. And then I have the coupler on the keg, both valves turned off. If I were to just slam it on and this was open, it would just be a bunch of CO2 blasting out immediately. So we're gonna invert the keg. I do that by tilting, grabbing onto the handle here, reaching down and grabbing the bottom of the keg and lifting up like so. So we've got the keg on top. We're gonna open our valve. It's gonna spray out a bunch of beer at first, any residual beer, and then it's gonna blast CO2. Once it's done depressurizing, we're gonna open the beer line, which is the next valve. And that means that we have access to the dip tube that runs up to the top of the keg. We're going to run hot water through the pump and the hoses, come up through this valve into the dip tube and cascade over the side of the inside of the keg, rinsing it with hot water. So we've got water going inside of the spear, cascading over the inside of the keg, and then coming out of this CO2 outlet, because that's where gas normally comes in. This is where the rinse water will come out. This keg will fill up with water, and so we need to pressurize it in order to get all of the water out effectively. That's where CO2 comes into play. So we're gonna open this valve just for a second. There's that. We're gonna shut this off. We just need a bit. And it spits it all out. I do 1 to 2 rinses with hot water like that. This first one was a bunch of cooler water coming through, so I'm gonna do one with hot water just to make sure that this keg warms up a bit. And then we'll move through the rest of them, getting them all rinsed up, and then we will show you the next step in the process. Oh, fuck. And I forgot on the last one, whenever you are done with this, you want to close the CO2 valve and the liquid valve so that when you turn the keg over, it's sealed. And I like to move these out of the way. So these 2 are now rinsed, and I'm working on dirty kegs on top from here on out. All right, I have successfully rinsed all of the dirty kegs. I'm only gonna do 6 of them today, including this little cutie, little quarter barrel. Now I need to move on to the wash cycle. This is the part where it gets a little bit interesting. This step right here, pretty self-explanatory. You can hook up a hose to hot water and rinse the keg. But now comes the tricky part when you need to wash the inside of the keg with chemicals. We are going to utilize a 2-compartment sink in order to do this. So a keg washer is basically a 2-compartment sink. It's got detergent chemicals, caustic or some other cleaning solution, and a sanitizer basin as well. And then it's hooked up to hot water for the rinse cycle. The way that a keg washer works is it will switch off, either manually switching valves from cleaner to sanitizer to hot water and recirculating that product inside of the keg and reclaiming it, or it is using solenoid valves and it's pre-programmed and it's more automatic. What we're gonna do is act like this is our keg washer basin, which it technically is, and we're going to fill that with cleaning solution, PBW to be precise, hot water, and we are going to drape the inlet hose that's connected to the hot water in there, and that is going to suck the cleaning solution through our pump, pushing it up through the coupler, and we will lean the keg up so that it reclaims back into the sink. So this is a really effective way to do this. If you don't have a keg washer, this cost me $0 to wash kegs because I had all this shit already. So I'm gonna show you that setup now. And I'm going to fill this up with hot water. I'm gonna add my PBW. I'm going to disconnect this tri-clamp. I'm gonna set my water filter down. It will come in handy in just a second. Drape this hose over my valve, and it'll keep it in the back left corner so that it can hold the water from the lowest point in here. Since I'm doing this for $0 and not using any specialized equipment in order to wash kegs, there are some nuances to this. Obviously the rag on the faucet where it sprays water everywhere. Obviously the plastic wrap strainer for my basin stopper. But here's where it gets real peculiar. I use a pan on top of my water filter to act as a support for the kegs. Before I start on the kegs, I'm going to make sure that I have water coming from the inlet of the pump into the pump and out of the coupler by turning the pump on and turning my valve on. And it looks like we do. And shut this valve, and then we can start on our first keg. Both valves are off, remember that. I'm going to invert it the way that I showed you. I'm going to grab the handle, tilt it forward, and grab it from the bottom. And I'm going to twist it, make sure that my hose isn't pinched, and it is supported by that little tray that I was telling you about. My coupler is underneath and attached. So now I need to open the gas valve. That actually was a vacuum, not pressure, because it cooled down. And then I'm going to open my liquid valve. And now all I have to do is open my pump valve. And I'm going to do that at about 45 degrees so that it's not a full force pump. It is now pumping through the hose, up into the keg, all over the inside of the keg, and it's coming out. So I know what you're thinking. Andy, you're a genius. Andy, this is probably the smartest thing I've ever seen on YouTube, and you're right. But it didn't take that much effort or time, and it took $0 to make this happen. I already had a coupler because I fill kegs. I already had a fill line to connect to the coupler because I fill kegs. I already have a pump because I own a brewery. And I already had a hose because, again, I own a brewery. I have the chemicals. I have a 2-compartment sink. I have a little pan. And I've got hot water. That's pretty much all you need to do a keg washing run. We will show you the sanitizing loop after this, but I'm going to let you watch me switch out a couple of kegs. I usually do about 2 minutes per keg. Once I'm done with this cycle, I will shut the valve off. I will turn the CO2 on to blast out any residual PVW solution, and then I will move on to the next keg. We're using CO2 in the entire process because we want to make sure that these kegs are purged with CO2. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. I'm going to shut my valve. The pump is still running, but I'm shutting my valve so that more liquid cannot go into the keg. I'm opening my CO2 valve, and this is set at a pressure of about 16 to 18 PSI. That's coming out pretty vigorously. I'm going to turn off my CO2. CO2 blasted out. Now I'm going to reach down here, turn my CO2 valve off, turn my liquid line valve off, and I'm going to do a different keg. Always make sure that the clean kegs are separated from the dirty kegs. This is obvious. Place it on top of my little pan, open my CO2 valve, open my gas valve, and open my pump valve. While this is working, I also like to clean the bottom and outside of the kegs, give them a scrub with the PVW solution. It's usually not too bad on the stainless kegs, but these plastic kegs, they can get kind of grimy on the bottom. So just keep your kegs clean all around. You should be good. All right, so I'm gonna let this keg finish up. I'm gonna finish the other 4 kegs over here, and we'll be back when we come on to the rinse step, which is the next step in the process. I'm done with the wash cycle. So now I need to drain our reservoir of cleaning solution. I'm going to reattach to our filter again, and then we're gonna do the same rinse that we did before. And we're alternating CO2 and hot water. 10 seconds water, few seconds CO2. All right, final rinse. We're gonna let all of the water evacuate the keg. We'll turn off our gas, turn off our gas valve, our liquid valve. Move on to the next keg. Next up is sanitizing. So I just wrapped up the rinsing portion. I'm now gonna disconnect my hose from my filter. I'm gonna replace it to the same place that it was before. And I'm gonna begin filling my basin, my sink with water. Fill it up with, again, about 5 gallons of water. Add my sanitizer, which happens to be a SaniClean. And then we are gonna go ahead and complete our keg washing circuit by sanitizing the inside of the keg. Make sure that my valves are open. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a whirl. Got our sanitizer in there. We're gonna go ahead and keep this recirculating. So this is the last step in the process. We are sanitizing the keg now. So I've got the SaniClean pumping from the bottom of the pump out into the coupler, sanitizing the inside of this. We're gonna do that for about 2 minutes, similar to the wash cycle. And the only difference is when this is complete, we're going to turn our CO2 valve on, but we're gonna leave it on. And what that's gonna do is it's going to push all of the sanitizer out of the keg, which makes sense. But then we are going to cap the outlet, which in this case is the gas valve of the keg, and it'll begin to pressurize. So we're gonna pressurize this to about 15 PSI. We want it to be higher than the pressure of the tank so that when we go to fill the keg, we can bleed off and we can have a nice equilibration between the tank and the keg so that we can fill at a nice slow and steady rate. 2 minutes is up. We're now sending CO2 into the keg and pushing out any of the residual sanitizer. Quite a bit of sanitizer. So we're gonna shut off our valve. This is gonna pressurize. We're gonna watch this. So this will keep running to pressurize the keg. Once that regulator stops making noise because it has a lot of throughput, we're gonna crack this CO2 valve. We're going to bleed off any residual sanitizer that's in the keg. We're gonna do that twice. And once that's complete, the keg is washed and sanitized. First one, we're just gonna come down here, crack. I don't know if you can see, that's the little bit of sanitizer that's left. Close it up, and then I like to do one big blast. Cool. Now that that's done, reach under, get the liquid valve, turn off my CO2 valve. I'm gonna pull my keg off. We're gonna disengage it, place it to the clean keg area, move on to the next one. And that's it. That's how you clean a keg with no keg washer in a tiny brewery. I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of these cleaned up. It's probably gonna take me another 30 minutes or so. And once they're all clean, I'll get blank keg collars on them. The keg collars are these guys. I just use blank ones, write them in, nothing fancy. We'll get blank ones on here to identify them as clean kegs. And then I will be ready to rack the beer out of the bright tank and brew tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson on how to wash kegs in a tiny brewery without a keg washer. Stay tuned for more. What else do you want to see? Comment down below. Let me know if you want to see anything else as far as process is concerned. I've overviewed brewing, racking, or maybe I didn't do racking. Yeah, I've overviewed quite a few things. So let me know if you want to see anything else on the YouTube video. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rolling along and providing some content. Hopefully this was entertaining as well. That's it. Cheers. Na Zdraví.